These elitists come from families that took native lands. They have criminally exploited these lands ever since. The tar sands are another excellent example of their corruption.
All across the Boreal, it's home for a huge, incredible range of indigenous peoples and a rich and varied culture. And I think that one of the reasons why so many of these groups have retained a link to the past, know their native languages, the songs, the dances, the traditions, I think part of that reason is because of the remoteness, the span, and the wilderness of this almost 95% intact ecosystem. And I think particularly now, as we see ourselves in a time of environmental crisis, we can learn so much from these people who have lived so sustainably in this ecosystem for over 10,000 years. Part of this ecosystem is the very antithesis of all of these values that we've been talking about. And I think these are some of the core values that make us proud to be Canadians. This is the Alberta tar sands, the largest oil reserves on the planet outside of Saudi Arabia. Trapped underneath the boreal forests and wetlands of northern Alberta are these vast reserves of this sticky tar-like bitumen. And the mining and the exploitation of that is creating devastation on a scale that the planet has never seen before. I want to try to convey some sort of a sense of the size of this. If you look at that truck there, it is the largest truck of its kind on the planet. It's a 400-ton capacity dump truck. And its dimensions are 45 feet long by 35 feet wide and 25 feet high. If I stand beside that truck, my head comes to around the bottom of the yellow part of that hubcap. Within the dimensions of that truck, you could build a 3,000 square foot, two-story home quite easily. I did the math. So instead of thinking of that as a truck, think of that as a 3,000 square foot home. That's not a bad sized home. And line those truck/homes back and forth across there from the bottom all the way to the top. And then think of how large that very small section of one mine is. Now you can apply that same kind of thinking here as well. Now here you see, of course, as you go further on, these trucks become like a pixel. Again, imagine those all back and forth there. How large is that one portion of a mine? That would be a huge, vast metropolitan area, probably much larger than the city of Victoria. And there are about another 40 or 50 in the approval process. No tar sands mine has actually ever been denied approval, so it is essentially a rubber stamp. The other method of extraction is what's called the in situ, and here massive amounts of water are superheated and pumped through the ground through this vast networks of pipelines, seismic lines, drill pads, compressor stations. And even though this looks maybe not quite as repugnant as the mines, it's even more damaging in some ways. It impacts and fragments a larger part of the wilderness, where there's 90% reduction of key species like woodland caribou and grizzly bears, and it consumes even more energy, more water, and produces at least as much greenhouse gas. So these in situ developments are at least as ecologically damaging as the mines in terms of producing carbon per person. The tailings ponds are the largest toxic impoundments on the planet. Oil sands, or rather I should say tar sands, oil sands is a PR-created term so that the oil companies wouldn't be trying to promote something that sounds like a sticky tar-like substance that's the world's dirtiest oil. So they decided to call it oil sands. The tar sands consume more water than any other oil process. 3 to 5 barrels of water are taken, polluted, and then returned into tailings ponds, the largest toxic impoundments in the planet. Syncrude, just one of the licensees in just one of their tailings ponds, dumps 250,000 tons of this toxic gunk every single day. That's creating the largest toxic impoundments in the history of the planet. So far, this is enough toxin to cover the face of Lake Erie a foot deep. And the tailings ponds range in size up to 9,000 acres. That's 2/3 the size of the entire island of Manhattan. The massive toxic wastelands are built unlined and on the banks of the Athabasca River. And the Athabasca River drains downstream to a range of Aboriginal communities. In Fort Chipewyan, the 800 people there are finding toxins in the food chain. This has been scientifically proven. The tar sands toxins are in the food chain, and this is causing cancer rates up to 10 times what they are in the rest of Canada. In spite of that, people have to eat this food in order to survive. The incredibly high price of flying food into these remote northern Aboriginal communities and the high rate of unemployment makes this an absolute necessity for survival. And not that many years ago, I was lent a boat by a First Nations man. And he said, when you go out on the river, do not under any circumstances eat the fish. It's carcinogenic. And yet on the front porch of that man's cabin, I saw 4 fish. He had to feed his family to survive. And as a parent, I just can't imagine what that does to your soul. At international conferences, whether they're in Copenhagen or Cancun, international conferences on climate change, we're the country that gets the dinosaur award every single day as being the biggest obstacle to progress on this issue. Just 70 miles downstream is the world's largest freshwater delta, the Peace Athabasca Delta, the only one at the juncture of all 4 migratory flyways. This is a globally significant wetland, perhaps the greatest on the planet, incredible habitat for half the bird species you find in North America migrating here, and also the last refuge for the largest herd of wild bison, and also, of course, critical habitat for another whole range of other species. 2 is being threatened by the massive amount of water being drawn from the Athabasca, which feeds these wetlands, and also the incredible toxic burden of the largest toxic unlined impoundments on the planet, which are leaching into the food chain for all the species downstream. This is the infrastructure as we see it about now. This is what's planned for 2015. And you can see here the Keystone Pipeline, which would take tar sands raw down to the Gulf Coast, punching a pipeline through the agricultural heart of North America, of the United States, and securing the contract with the dirtiest fuel in the world by consumption of the United States, and promoting a huge disincentive to a sustainable clean energy future for America.
Okay, so we're looking at a couple of areas. A little later on, we're going to explore this area, the Kalamazoo River, and last summer's Enbridge pipeline burst down there. Enbridge took 3 days to discover that their pipeline had burst. They lied about how much had actually leaked into the environment. And they also lied in how they disposed of the oil. They covered up a lot of the oil with canvas and seeded it and left the oil in bogs. But if we trace the oil pipeline back, it comes from this region here called the tar sands. Now, we have Fort McMurray. This is where it is. And you go just north of Fort McMurray, and you can see tar sands projects, tailings ponds. This is the Athabasca River, and I believe that would be another tailings pond in there. They have a huge, actually this looks like, you can see how these mines work, how they carve out this oily, toxic substance. I know of people who have health and safety concerns for these companies, and they've been fired. There's another tar sands project here with huge tailings ponds and some more mining. And again, by the Athabasca River. And the Athabasca River flows up north into the Peace Athabasca Delta. The Peace River flows to the north. And as you can see, we have, this is Lake Athabasca, Lake Claire, Mamawi Lake, and Lake Galoot. And I wouldn't want to eat fish or drink water out of any of these lakes. And you can see how this toxic goo is starting to go into the southwest corner of Lake Athabasca.
Thousands of gallons of oil leak from a ruptured oil pipeline into the Kalamazoo River.
This is a crisis that should have been prevented. It was created because of negligence by Enbridge.
Originally, Enbridge told us that 819,000 gallons of oil spilled into the Kalamazoo River. Today, the EPA said 1.1 million gallons has been cleaned up, and there's still more out there.
The Athabasca tar sands has a pipeline that goes down into the United States in several points, but one particular pipeline goes down through Michigan. We haven't traced the whole trail yet. We're looking at it, and it burst here in Kalamazoo, and the Kalamazoo River flows into Lake Michigan over here, so it flows from east to west. And just south of Marshall, they're finding all sorts of oil showing up in this area here. And down in here, there's oil that is leaked all over through here. So let John Bolenbaugh explain the rest.
Hundreds of acres, they put this canvas over the top of it, and then they planted grass seed underneath it, and this grass grows up.
It's 150 full-length football fields of oil they didn't know was here.
It's all oil, mixed with mud. Middle of the winter, I brought the press out here, and I fell right through. It's October 9th. I just showed you the coordinates. We're at Talmadge Creek, and I'm going to just show you that they put sand over the top of the oil. Can you see how clear it is? You can see right down to the bottom. Looks really clear. I'm going to take some sand. I'm going to show you real close up. This is sand. All right? See there's no sheen? The reason why that's important is because when I dig down, the oil is underneath the sand. See it coming up? It's under the sand. It's not in the sand, it's under the sand that they put there.
You had after the oil spill?
I had 3 seizures at the other house and 2 seizures where I live now.
And my son actually had an episode where he looked like he was having seizures, passing out. I even took him to the ER.
I got migraines. I had a seizure for the first time in my life.
This is why we have to stop Enbridge and these oil companies from doing this. They're having seizures and they're getting sick from this tar sand oil. Please help us.